Welcome to our adventure into the Bach Inventions and Sinfonias. I'm going to talk now about some of the terms that I mentioned in the technique section of the introduction. Those of you who are familiar with the first two volumes in this series will already understand about these principles. But for those of you who haven't read those first two volumes, which are, by the way, Piano Technique Demystified and its sequel, Further Insights into Piano Technique, I begin with the basic concept of rotation itself. I'm talking about this kind of a movement, a forearm rotation. You can look at other tabs in this same section on my blog for more description of basic forearm rotation. But what I want to talk to you about now is the concepts of how the rotation works with the two hands together. I'm going to just take an arbitrary interval here. Let's say I'll take this sixth. Let's say I'm on my third finger in each hand. There are four applications of forearm rotation when the two forearms move together at the same time. Parallel left, which would be this. Parallel right would be this. Opposite inward, which would be this. Opposite outward, which would be that. Obviously, I'm exaggerating considerably. Side note, please remember that forearm rotation is an underlying tool. Let me repeat that. It is only an underlying tool. It is not how we play the piano. We can't play by doing that up and down the keyboard. The purpose of it is to help us figure out where the arm is in relationship to the finger as it plays. And this can be a crucial element in feeling the coordination in contrapuntal music. So I use it as a device for teaching the hands what they're supposed to do, the hands and forearms, the entire playing apparatus, for teaching them what they do first individually and then what it feels like when they do them together. So let's say I have these notes and I have to move to another note that is one note higher. The music is moving in parallel fashion, which means that my hands feel like they're doing opposite things. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But this is the parallel left. I rotate to the left in order to play a note to the right. Now my arm is behind those two fingers. Let's say I want to move back down again to where I just was. Both forearms are going to rotate parallel to the right in order to go play a note that's to the left. Let's say now that I want to go play the two notes moving musically in opposite direction. And notice the right hand is moving down, the left hand is moving up. In this case, because the hands are mirror images of each other, when they do opposite movements, they feel like they're doing the same thing. I know, boggles the mind, doesn't it? But it's a terribly important concept. So this feels like I'm doing the same thing in each hand. So if I have to move from this position to two notes moving in opposite musical directions, my hands are moving opposite out to play in. Opposite outward in order to play the next note downward in the right, up in the left. Let's say I want to go back from this position to where I just was. I'm going to open my hands opposite inward in order to move upward to the right in my right hand and down in my left hand. That's really all it is. Those are the four basic applications of when the hands have to move together in forearm rotation. Let me give you one or two examples from the book. Here's figure 1-5, is in the first chapter, example 5. The important issue here, and there are lots of subtle changes in all of these examples, and I'm not going to go through all of the examples, because I think once you understand these basic techniques, you'll be able to apply them very easily to all of the other examples. But here in figure 1-5, you'll notice that what we have to do is teach the left hand to play 4 while the right hand is playing 2. You may say, duh, that's obvious, but you'd be surprised at how confused the hands can get. Then on the next note, it's the same finger. Sometimes I actually say the fingers out loud just to remind my hands, which can be a little bit stupid sometimes. I have to remind them what finger they play. Now what I just showed you was parallel rotation, parallel leftward. The music is moving parallel upward, so I feel rotation to the left, parallel leftward in order to play the next note up. Now if I had to play that in reverse, it would be parallel right in order to move down in both notes. That's figure 1-5. Let's look now at figure 1-10, which is similar to what I just showed you. But what is important is to notice which fingers are actually playing those notes. Now I'm going to show you opposite outward. In this case, the hands feel like they're doing the same thing because they're moving in opposite directions. Remember, mirror images. Rotate outward in order to move in opposite directions. Musically, I'm moving down in the right hand and up in the left hand. Now let's take a slightly more complicated example. This is figure 1-16. I'm going to show you first what happens and then I'll talk through it. So it's a combination of outward and inward rotation and some parallel as well. So if we look at the first beat, the first 4/16 notes, I'm starting here. I have parallel to the left, parallel to the right, parallel to the left again, parallel to the right. Now because the music changes directions in each hand, down in the right hand, up in the left hand. So that's a feeling of outward opposite rotation. Now notice that I'm moving up in the right hand and down in the left hand, so it's opposite inward. So I feel like the backs of my hands are moving toward each other. Again, this is huge, and I'm going to take my fifth finger here. Now again, it's opposite outward. Now parallel again. So this is, again, let me remind you, it is a tool. I practice this if there's a problem. I don't bother with it if there's no problem. But if there's a problem, I'll feel the rotation. And I might feel it that big. And then, if it doesn't work for me to do the hands together right away, I can do one hand at a time to feel what each hand does first by itself. The left hand. This is very useful when it comes to figuring out various contrapuntal passages. Then, as I just showed you, I can play them still a little bit exaggerated. Hands together. Now, this is what it looks like when I'm not exaggerating. I tell myself to forget about the rotation, and hopefully the playing apparatus remembers what it feels like to have completed each note and to have moved in the proper direction. It works very, very well. I encourage you to explore how to do that in the various examples in this piece. Another technique that is extraordinarily valuable, particularly when we're thinking linearly, which we must do when we're trying to create a musical line, and this is shaping. Sometimes the hands have to shape at the same time, which for some pianists, in the beginning particularly, it can cause some issues. I'm looking now at figure 14-6 to talk about shaping. If there's an issue in this passage, I might take the hands apart first and notice that when the music moves downward, the pitches move downward, there's going to be a slight over shape. This as opposed to this. So it's a little bit over on the way down, under on the way up. Now between these next two notes, it's going to be over because it's moving down, under on the way up. Now I'm going to start over. Interestingly, because the music is moving parallel, the notes in each hand are moving parallel to each other, the music, that is the pitches, are moving in parallel direction. Since the hands are mirror images of each other, it feels like they're doing different things. So the shaping in the left hand is going to be the reverse. The right hand is over this way, the left hand is going to be under and over on the way up. So the left hand by itself is under on the way down, over on the way up, under between these two notes, over. So when I practice them together, and I'll try to do it really slowly so that you can see, it's harder to do slower in a way. So the right hand is over and the left hand is under. And I'm making it really big to show you. Once again. A little bit faster. This sort of movement has actually been described as rowing. I can't attest to that because I have never rowed in an actual boat. It looks like this. Shaping. Now let's talk about something that sometimes makes people cross their eyes in confusion, but it's really not complicated at all. I'm looking at figure 22-7. The passage is this. Even though we very often group notes together that move in the same direction, for example, these three notes go in the same direction, those four notes go in the same direction, now these go in the same direction too. But the reason I adjust the grouping slightly here is because I need to use fourth finger here so that I can get to this chord. So I don't like feeling that as a group. This is not a nice feeling at all. So I'm going to start over with my fourth finger. But you might well ask, how do I get from 5 to 4? This is called a walking hand. So it's a combination of this forearm rotation moving this way toward 4 and a little bit of, it's not exactly a pluck, and I don't like to use the word push, but it's a little bit like standing on a diving board and flexing a little bit so that I get off of this note and it sends me there. But notice I'm not staying there. I'm not trying to make a literal finger legato from there to there, but I'm using this as a way of getting off of that note so that I can move here. So if I just look at that from the second beat going to the third beat, so this will be the last note of that group. And as always, the last note of one group throws me to the first note of the next group. So it's this. And this is the same thing here. I'll do it really slowly and show you the groups. That's one group. Now I'm going to land on the next starting note. And on the next starting note. That's one group. Land on the next starting note. So a good way to practice it is just what I showed you. So the passage is this. So the crucial thing is just to keep in mind 2-5 land. Actually, my thumb is down here, so it's 2-5 land. A slight introduction to the walking hand. And now one quick word about the pluck. When I say pluck in terms of technique, I'm not really talking about a staccato, but I'm talking about just what I mentioned before about the diving board, that this throws me to the next place. It's not necessarily a short note. It might be a short note, but my objective is not to play a staccato note, but it's to use this note to get me to some other place. I'm looking now at figure 1-2 in the first invention, where the composer asks us to do this. Most editions finger it, as I just showed you, 5-3. There are other ways of fingering it, but I like this because it also shows a nice articulation, a little bit of separation from here to here. You can decide if you want it super short, or if you just want to use that as a diving board to get you to the next place. You may have noticed, as I've demonstrated a few times, I'm using this, what I call the pluck, gets me the distance, which sends me laterally. It's not up, it's lateral. Now I'm over the note I want, and I simply turn in to play it. So it's pluck and rotation. There's virtually no upper arm involved. I'm simply hinged in my elbow. Pluck, rotate, land. All leaps can be negotiated that way. Figure 1-2, pluck.